Aloha and welcome to the Embodied Healing Self podcast with your host, Jen Mons. Each week, join me for soul-inspired, conscious conversations around embodied healing and awakening to your soul's purpose. Thank you for listening in. The content of this podcast is to educate, inspire, and inform you of pathways to an embodied healing self. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice from your medical doctor, therapist, registered dietitian, or nutritionist for any questions you may have regarding your diagnosis or condition. Aloha and welcome. Thank you for joining me today. So our topic today is to let fear be the catalyst for creating change in your life. So it's the end of January, and you may or may not have started to create some changes in your life. And by now, maybe some of you are settling into the inner critic or the self-doubt that maybe it's just not going to happen this year. Maybe, I'm just not ready for this. There's not enough time. There's not enough money. There's not enough support. There's many, many negative beliefs and self-talk that can make their way into our mind this time of the year as we start getting ready for February. So we're going to talk today about one of my favorite topics. I've done online webinars on this and classes on how to transform your fears into empowering one, and how it can be the catalyst for creating change. The idea that our biggest challenges that are holding us back can actually be our biggest teachers and our greatest gifts. So I'm going to invite you to consider the power of harnessing change and what that looks like as we look around in our world. Like if you look outside during springtime, we notice that, a seed falls from a tree and it plants itself in the ground. And eventually that seed begins to sprout and turns into a full-grown tree or a flower or some other type of plant-producing gift in nature. And this is really what's happening all around us. And we're no different. We're no different from that little seedling, that's how we were created, that transforms into this beautiful, amazing flower, butterfly human being. Like we're all a part of that same cycle. And we have a choice. We can resist the power of change, or we can live in the flow. We can live in the flow of Mother Nature's natural cycle. We've all witnessed many, many changes in our lifetimes. We've witnessed the changes in technology. We've witnessed the changes in humanity. We've witnessed the changes in the rights that we have as human beings over the years. We've witnessed the change in our foods, the change in our healthcare system. We've witnessed so many changes throughout our lifetime. And so maybe this makes us feel uncomfortable because we're not really sure about what's going to happen. Maybe we're comfortable with where we are, and that's perfectly fine. I invite you to explore the expansion and contraction of the cycle. So although I love change and expansion, it's also important to honor those times of contraction, those times of self-reflection, those times of being. The expansion is normally a time of taking inspired action steps of doing to creating change. And then we can step back into the contraction and welcome the being, welcome the journey, welcome the reflection of the experience. So I'm going to share with you a personal story on why I'm pretty sure this podcast didn't start in 2016. I was invited to attend a workshop. It was a personal growth workshop. And I'll include the name of it in my email. And at first, when I decided to go to this workshop, I thought it was a yoga retreat. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And as I attended this workshop, I quickly realized that this was really like a place that welcomed pure vulnerability to show up just as who we are, which allowed us to really heal from the experiences that we have had in our life that have held us back. Because I'm sure everybody who's listening in on this podcast has had some type of traumatic event in your life that keeps you fearful of the future. And I invite you to consider what you might be missing out on. So my personal experience was of course, as many of us can be, when we experience trauma in our life or loss of something, which I've experienced many, many different types of trauma and loss in my life, as most of us have. What I realized is that I was kind of numb to it and completely in denial that I had anything I needed to work on. And given the space, sacred space and safe space to be held and to really explore that, which is something that I now do with my clients through the training that I've done, really allowed me to be present with the fact that this, the energy of the fear was still in my body. It was holding me back. It was showing up as resistance, and it was creating actually a lot of discomfort in my body. So for me personally, the most life-changing traumatic event that occurred in my life was the one of my near-death experience, where because I was heavily medicated, all of the energy that my body was using in order to keep me alive, because it was an autoimmune liver failure that was happening, was suddenly my own body's natural responses were shut down because I was heavily medicated, and all that stored energy that my physical body had was like just came to a stop, like almost like putting the brake pedals on. And I never had a chance to express it, acknowledge it, or experience it. And so many of you may be able to think of a time in your life where this has happened. Maybe you were in a car accident and immediately your body goes into fight or flight to protect yourself, to take that next step. What am I going to do? Maybe you lost a loved one and all of a sudden you found yourself holding space for other people, being the supportive one for other people. And maybe you didn't give yourself the chance to be really present with how that felt for you. Maybe you received some really traumatic news or something upsetting, or there was an event in your life that was really overwhelming and you didn't allow yourself to really notice and feel what you needed to in that moment. And when we don't do that, we hold on to those emotions. And so, for example, one of the clients I worked with had a fear of failure. And so she was really not wanting to start a healthy lifestyle program because she really didn't think that she could succeed. And this first time this happened in her life was when she was a little girl and about 7 years old. And she was in a situation where she found herself just being made fun of and told she couldn't do things. I mean, she was told she couldn't do things that other people could do. And somewhere in her body, to keep herself safe, she acknowledged that belief, and it stuck with her for almost 40 years. And it wasn't until we did a somatic inquiry process where we're working through finding what those fears and beliefs are that we acknowledged that the first time that this feeling that we had in her body was back when she was 7 years old, that she was able to acknowledge how this has shown up as a repetitive pattern. So that's what happens is that these fears and beliefs can show up as a repetitive pattern. And that's what happened with me. When I was able to fully experience and the situation that happened to me back in 2006 with my life-threatening experience, my near-death experience, I had never had that opportunity to actually fully experience it because my body wasn't really functioning. It was just functioning on whatever medication I was on. And I actually really didn't even know what had happened because my brain didn't allow me to really remember. I only remembered certain pieces. And given the safe space that I had been held in to really go through that process again and experience it and feel it in my physical body, I started to realize that that's where some of my gifts were. I had this fear of dying and, in these experiences, this fear of like my spirit wanting to leave my body. Well, that's because I had already had that experience, but I knew that I was safe. And what happened is that began to allow me to tap into some of the gifts that I use in coaching, which is the quality of being a highly empathic, intuitive coach, which I do believe most of us are capable of through training and awareness, but it's something that has really just allowed me to serve clients over the year, this really high level of compassion and empathy that allows me to see, sense, or feel what the other person is experiencing, and then I receive a message of what might be needed for this person. So really just being in tune with what the person's needs are. And because I was so afraid and wasn't trusting my physical body, I wasn't trusting this empathic, intuitive ability that I had been given, and I wasn't trusting my own intuition. But I would see the patterns of how it would show up and how it was always right. And I would know, I would have an answer on how to help somebody, and I wouldn't even know where it came from. And I thought it was just really smart, but it was really just this awareness and this connection in the experience with the other person and trusting that that was real. So my gift, my fear of not trusting my body, turned out to be the catalyst for one of my greatest gifts in how I work with people. So that whole idea of trusting the self-awareness, trusting the connection between the person, trusting the guidance that I'm receiving in the coaching session. So I invite you to consider that for a moment. So what is an area of your life where your fear is really holding you back? It could be a fear of failure. It could be a fear of rejection, a fear of judgment. I mean, this has shown up for me personally so many times, so I know it's shown up for you. There's a book I started writing 3 years ago. It's about conscious parenting. Who am I to write that book, right? But my story is powerful. And so there's a judgment that says no one's going to listen. People are going to think you're crazy. We all have it. It's just our ego coming in, trying to keep us small, keep us in check. So I'm going to share with you signs that you're ready for a big transformation or a change, because I have done this work enough to see the patterns in people and in my own self-work. So what usually happens before we're ready to commit to a change is we start to experience a little bit of an emotional roller coaster. We feel like, oh, I feel really good, like I can do this. And then the self-doubt sets in. It's like, no, you can't do this. It's not the right time. And then we are inspired by other people for a moment. And then, yeah, I don't know. I just don't know if it's for me, or I can't do this. So you start to become a little bit more in touch with your emotional awareness, which is healthy emotional space. And that awareness almost seems to create a little bit more of a roller coaster. But it's really just that we're more aware of like how we're feeling, because now we're connecting with our physical body, we're connecting with our emotional space. And we know, like our higher self knows that we want to create change in our life. We just don't know how we're going to get there. So we kind of go back and forth like, yeah, we know we're going to do it. And then I don't know if I can. And also, one of the things that starts to happening as we get ready to create a major change in our life is we start to look around and notice it in other people. We start to see the possibility, but we're just not sure if we can do it, but we can see it. We're aware of it. We can see it in other people. Maybe we know it in ourselves. We just don't know how we're going to get there. And then the self-doubt comes in. And undoubtedly, the self-doubt and the inner critic are going to come in. They're going to come in. And this is because we go through this expansion and contraction. Before we're going to make a big expansion in life, we need to have some type of contraction. We may have an uncertain life event. I can't tell you how many times in my life before stepping into something new and expanding, I've had a major contraction. When I wanted to launch this podcast 3 years ago, immediately when I felt like I was on fire, I lost a loved one in my family. And then a couple months later was removed from my home from a hurricane. And as I came back around and stepped into it, that contraction, that time was really a time for me to prepare for what was next. Because what was next was the expansion of what I was stepping into in my coaching business, which was shifting. It was shifting from just health coaching to health and life coaching and emotional empowerment. And so I invite you to consider that and to have compassion and be okay with those contractions. Be okay with, things, I thought it was on the path of a transformation and now it looks like I'm not. Well, I invite you to be okay with that. It doesn't last forever. It's just temporary. And lastly, one of the things, the human experiences that I often see before people are really, this happens all the time in my line of work, that I often see is that we begin to procrastinate. When we know we're going to create change in our life, when our higher self knows that life is about to change, like we're going to create some change and we're going to, step up and we're going to be empowered with our health. We're going to be empowered with our relationships. We're going to speak our inner voice. We're going to take care of our body. We're going to create that change we want. I'm going to write that book. I'm going to launch that podcast. I'm going to do whatever it is that I want to do. You're going to do what you want to do. It gets really easy to procrastinate because it's so much more comfortable just being where we are. And so when you notice that procrastination, it's an invitation to, again, witness it and be like, okay, I notice I'm procrastinating. That's probably because I know I'm about to step into something new. I'm really about to create that change in my life that I want to. And have compassion for the procrastination, witness it, allow it, and just let it pass. And then get back to what were those steps I was going to take again? Why is it that I want to create this change? Like, what is the real reason I'm doing this? So those are some indicators that can show up when you're getting ready to create change in your life. So if you're noticing those, I just invite you to witness it, maybe journal about it, get some support or help, get a coach, a friend, a mentor, an accountability partner, maybe to keep you on track. And of course, most importantly, believe in yourself to be able to do it. And allow those fears that come up, whatever fear it is, to be the catalyst for the change you want to create. So if your belief is that you don't have the time to do something, consider that we all have the same 24 hours in a day, and consider, how might I look at this differently? How can I create space for more time? This is an opportunity to let go of the things in my schedule that really aren't that important to me, or to manage the time in my schedule in a way where I am doing the things that are both important to getting to where I want to go. And if your limiting belief is that you don't have the financial resources, it's an opportunity to look at the bigger picture and say, okay, well, how am I spending my financial resources? Am I spending them in a way that's in alignment with what's important to me? And if your limiting belief is one that I don't have the support, or I don't have a healthy emotional relationship with somebody who's going to get me there, then I invite you to consider a new way of looking for support. Maybe it's not going to come from somebody personal. Maybe it's not a friend or a spouse or a loved one. Maybe it's a coach or a mentor or a teacher. Or if you've been using a coach, a mentor or a teacher, maybe it's going to come from somebody more personal, because maybe it's one of your children. Maybe your child is here to teach you and empower you. Maybe it's your loved one or your spouse. So this is really an invitation to consider, acknowledge what those things are that we talked about a couple weeks ago, standing in the way of you getting from where you are to where you want to be. Write them down. And again, remind yourself, connect with where it is that you want to be. Acknowledge what you believe is standing in the way. And notice in your body, when did that first show up? When did that feeling, when you think about that fear, when did that first show up in your life? Maybe that's where the healing starts. Maybe there was a situation that happened when you were a child that has created a pattern in your life. And if you're ready to break that pattern and get really clear on what it is that you want, then I invite you to sit with what it is that's coming up for you. Sit with that uncomfortable space for a minute. Really notice where it is in your body. Pay attention to it. Be present with it. Where do I feel it in my body? What am I feeling? I'm feeling self-doubt. I'm feeling lack of self-worth. I'm feeling like I'm not good enough. I'm feeling fear. What is it that you need? I need support. I need safety. I need love. So connect with what you're experiencing and also identify what it is you need. Because that's where the change happens. When we connect with our self-awareness of what it is that we need to get to where we want to go. And so we're not resisting. We're not denying our experiences. We don't have to numb out to them. They're actually our greatest gifts. And it's so healthy and empowering to be able to be okay with that, to be okay with the painful experiences that we've had that have created these unhealthy beliefs. And then allowing those unhealthy beliefs just to be energy. They don't have to be who we are. We can be aware of them, but they don't have to have power over us. We can choose to take those unhealthy beliefs and create empowering ones to create change in our health, in our relationships, in our well-being, in our happiness, in our purpose, however that shows up. So I invite you to share with me, what are some of the fears that you've been experiencing? What are the ways that you've been able to allow them to be a catalyst for change? And again, if you're looking for support, one of my favorite things to do in the Transformation Roadmap session is to bust through those limiting fears and beliefs and create empowering action steps from there. Because they're an important part of who we are. All of our life experiences have brought us to where we are today. And so whether we liked them or not, they've all been gifts. They've gotten us to where we are. And when we don't acknowledge all of the things that we've been through to get to where we are, we're not really accepting our whole self. So to accept that whole self, we need to embrace all of the experiences and decisions that we've made to get to where we are. So I leave you with that. Thank you again for joining me. So I can't wait to see you next week. Have a wonderful day. Thank you and aloha. Hello, friends, and thank you so much for joining me today and being a part of this community. I know there are many other podcasts that you could be tuning into, and I am deeply honored that you chose to listen in and be present with me today. I love and cherish and appreciate you, and I want to invite you to join our tribe and Facebook group under jenmons.com/connect. I would also love to gift you your guide to discovering and overcoming the self-limiting beliefs standing in the way of you living in optimal health, more energy, fulfillment, and self-confidence to create an embodied, healthy, whole you. You can find this at jenmons.com/tribe. I also have one small request to help spread the love. In order for this podcast to show up in the feed of social media platforms of other like-minded people, we need reviews. So please head on over to jenmons.com/podcast to leave a review. You will also find other inspiring episodes on that page. So I personally read these reviews weekly and would love to give you a shout out and share your kind words with our listeners. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook as Jen Mons or The Holistic Coach with the W, Holistic, and Jen Mons, JEN, mons.com. Thank you so much and have an amazing day. Aloha.